President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, will arrive in Moscow on Wednesday. That's two days before Mr. Trump's deadline for Russia to agree a peace deal with Ukraine or face more sanctions. CNN's Nick Paton-Walsh is in southern Ukraine, joining us now. Nick, how are Ukrainians feeling about the hope of any progress this week? Or is the feeling that this Witkoff trip is just more about optics?
It's important to hold out the possibility for some sudden last-minute deal-making, but we seem exceptionally far away from that now, really because of the positioning of the Kremlin head. Vladimir Putin, clearly emboldened by the relative success of his summer offensive that has moved forwards, not always at the incremental pace of past months, but now putting his troops in a more strategic position along areas of the eastern front line. And the rhetoric coming from Moscow, very much one of defiance. And that may be what they seek to maintain up until that deadline. Is there a possibility that pressure on India, already touted by US President Donald Trump, may have some kind of impact in the days ahead on India's posturing? It's possible. He just recently reiterated the idea of more tariffs against India for purchasing Russian oil. It's unclear if that's already had an impact. There have been some suggestions India's changed its diet away from Russian oil over the past days or so. But the key customer here, that really, if there's going to be anything like damage to Russia's income, and Trump today suggested that if they take another $10 off the price of oil, that could really damage the Russian economy. He said the Russian economy, quote, stinks at the moment, and they simply couldn't afford the war, I paraphrase, there if the oil price sunk further, unless China's purchases are somehow dented by any kind of secondary sanctions. That I'm sure many in Ukraine will feel that this moment to be tough on Moscow has passed President Trump by. But a lot of concern building ahead of Friday, particularly for what it might mean for the nightly aerial assaults that many Ukrainians fear and endure every single night, and of course too for what it means for Trump's apparent conversion over the past months, having tried diplomacy, proximity to the Kremlin's narratives, and now being tougher on Russia. Do we actually see a real impact from these secondary sanctions in the next 48 hours, Christina?
Nick, appreciate you being with us there from southern Ukraine. That's Nick Paton-Walsh. The US president is threatening to raise tariffs on India, as we've been hearing there, very substantially over the next 24 hours. And speaking to CNBC earlier, Mr. Trump said he isn't happy with India continuing to purchase Russian oil and indirectly helping fund Russia's war effort. The US has previously announced its intentions to put secondary tariffs on countries that buy Russian energy. And Mr. Trump spoke about the impact he's hoping US sanctions will have on Russia's oil market.
If energy goes down low enough, Putin's going to stop killing people. That'll be nice, even though they're his own people that are dying, him and Ukraine. But Putin will stop killing people if you get energy down another $10 a barrel. He's going to have no choice because his economy stinks.
Anna Kubin is joining me to discuss, and just added to what we were hearing from President Trump there, Nick saying earlier that Trump had also said that $10 off the price of oil could really damage the Russian economy. What do we know about the real meaningful impact this could have on Russia?
Well, Russia's government revenues, a large part of that is made up of its energy exports. And so if you essentially discourage China and India, huge buyers of Russian oil, from doing so by making it prohibitively expensive, then you lower the demand for Russia's oil and therefore the price will come with it. The idea being that Russia will then have essentially less money to continue prosecuting its war in Ukraine. And by economic necessity, Trump therefore sort of pushes Putin towards a negotiating table. So that's the logic behind Trump's threats.
And how would this play out against the US? Because we know that any sanctions on on India, on China would certainly roil global markets, but would it have a direct impact on US markets too?
Well, that's the irony of this, is that if you raise tariffs, these secondary sanctions are essentially tariffs on goods imported into the US. You then essentially raise the end price for consumers for many products. And for a president that's made fighting inflation and pressuring the Fed to cut interest rates a key part of his mandate, that's pretty counterproductive. And the US as well, with its oil price, it's a major oil producer, oil exporter, but it still imports oil. And so if you essentially reduce the overall supply of global oil, therefore push up the price, you'll see US consumers pay more for their oil too.
All right, Anna, for now, thank you. Let's turn to Nigel Gould-Davis, who is the former UK ambassador to Belarus. He is a senior fellow for Russia and Eurasia at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. He joins us now live from London. Thank you so much for your time. I just want to begin with the events happening this week in Russia. It does feel as though, Donald Trump is becoming more and more drawn into this war that he wanted to be over in a day. And now he kind of owns it, as Nick was alluding to there earlier. He went from pausing the military aid to Ukraine to threatening nuclear force against Russia within a month. And there has been a substantial hardening of rhetoric. I just want to get your thoughts on what progress, if any, you think we might see this week as we march towards that Friday deadline.
You're absolutely right. This has been an astonishing, fluid moment in the diplomacy of this war. Donald Trump returning to the White House, bending over backwards to see things from Russia's point of view, giving Russia carrots, threatening Ukraine with sticks in order to try to bring about a ceasefire. That theory of peace failed. And President Trump's response has been not to walk away, not to move on, not to turn his back on trying to end the war, but by taking the opposite view, which is to try to end the war now by pressuring Russia in a way that I think has surprised everyone. It is interesting that although he has described it as Biden's war, he remains committed, actively committed, to investing diplomatic capital to try to end it. And now we have this extraordinary situation where he has issued an ultimatum to Putin for the first time. He then shortened it, so we have this drum roll for the next few days. And so a sort of slow game of chicken. These two resistant, increasingly opposed leaders colliding to a point of incompatibility. What will happen? Who will swerve? The consequences for Russia could be very serious if Donald Trump at last makes good on his threats.
Yes, and on those secondary sanctions. And to your earlier point, I think one who has been surprised by how they've been drawn into this war is India over, the imposition or the threat of those secondary tariffs. I want to ask you, because White House aide Stephen Miller has accused India of, quote, financing Russia's war in Ukraine, just how accurate that is, and if India are being unjustly targeted, because we know that there are, as Nick was saying earlier, others who import way more from Russia.
That's right. So the sanctions that the West and its partners began to impose on Russia after the February 2022 invasion have led to a far-reaching reorientation of Russia's trade, and it has switched, in particular, its oil exports, the lifeblood of the Russian economy, away from Europe towards China, even more than before, and dramatically towards India. Exports to India have risen 40-fold. Now, a proportion of that, of those exports, were then refined by India and re-exported to Europe. So there's been a problem there that the EU, with its latest sanctions package, is trying to address. But yes, India is, in effect, complicit. It's taken advantage of the fact that Russia needs new outlets for its oil. But India's role in sustaining Russia in Russia's war is dwarfed by China. Now, China is described by NATO as, quote, the decisive enabler of Russia's war on Ukraine. It's not only a matter of the oil that China imports, but also the ways that China abets sanctions evasion in favor of China, in favor of Russia, and increasingly is supplying large quantities of dual-use capable components and machinery to Russia. So if one is looking for an economic enabler of Russia, it would seem that the first target should be China rather than India.
What is the danger of a peace deal being pushed down the road now, even by just a few weeks, given what is happening on the battlefield right now, where Russia are pushing for the takeover of strategic towns, of strategic centres, as part of that summer offensive?
I think Putin is, of course, discomforted and uncertain about what might transpire over the next few days when President Trump's deadline falls due. But they won't fundamentally change his calculus. He does, in the larger scheme of things, feel confident, remain confident about his ability to win the war on his terms and not to achieve a ceasefire. This is really fundamental. This is the flaw at the heart, I'm afraid, of Mr. Witkoff's diplomacy in Moscow, fundamentally misjudging what Russia's calculus is. Putin places such a high priority on the ultimate goal of victory over Ukraine. It's a sort of historical psychological obsession that the only thing that's more important to Putin than achieving that is ensuring the survival and stability of his own regime at home. And that's why oil becomes so important. Oil is the Achilles heel of the Russian economy. And we've seen historically, every time Russia's hydrocarbon revenues fall fast and drastically, the Russian economy and Russian politics are changed. That was true in 1988. It was true in 1998. It was true in 2008. Let's see if it could be true in 2025.